Welcome, everyone. As members of the executive board, you know that protecting human life at sea isn't just a priority, it's our absolute mandate. Today, this explainer serves as a critical, clinical root cause analysis of one of the most catastrophic marine casualties in modern history, the sinking of the MS Salam Boccaccio 98. Our goal today isn't just to recount a terrible tragedy, we really need to dissect the systemic failures that allowed it to happen in the first place, so we can extract vital, actionable insights for our own fleet operations and safety protocols. So here is our roadmap for today's briefing. We're going to cover the incident and the investigation, walk through the exact sequence of the disaster, examine the technical and stability failures, analyze the crew's response, unpack the glaring gaps in regulatory oversight, and finally discuss actionable steps for enhancing future vessel safety. Let's start with Section 1, the incident and investigation, a preventable catastrophe. When we examine how this ship physically evolved, it's actually incredibly revealing. Back in 1991, the vessel underwent some massive structural modifications. They essentially added 3 upper accommodation decks along with side sponsons. Now, while these changes were great for increasing commercial capacity, they inherently raised the roll-on roll-off ferry's center of gravity. This essentially made the vessel permanently top-heavy, which severely reduced its righting moment. It created a latent, built-in defect regarding the ship's intact stability, leaving it profoundly vulnerable to any rapid loss of balance. The whole purpose of this explainer is to distill the official investigation's incredibly complex findings into clear, direct takeaways. As executives and fleet managers, we need to move far beyond simply assigning blame. We have to analyze these systemic, technical, and human failures to drive future marine casualty prevention and use this to aggressively audit our own internal safety management systems. Moving to Section 2, the sequence of the disaster, February 2nd to 3rd, 2006. If we anchor this postmortem to the voyage data recorder, we get a clear, agonizing timeline of how this crisis unfolded. At 1651 UTC, it was just a routine departure from Saudi Arabia. But by 1909, a fire alarm sounded on the bridge. What follows are literally hours where absolutely critical interventions were completely missed. At 2307, with the ship suffering a severe 15 degrees starboard list, a fatal ballasting order was given. And it wasn't until nearly 7 in the morning that a sister ship finally confirmed the vessel had actually sunk. This timeline shows us a slow-burning crisis, not some sudden, unpredictable event. Which brings us to Section 3, technical and stability failures, the domino effect. Okay, to really understand why this ship capsized, we have to talk about the free surface effect. In a ro-ro vessel, you have these cavernous, wide-open vehicle decks. Because the crew fought the fire continuously with water, massive amounts of liquid were introduced into this huge open space. Left unhindered, all that water just sloshed from side to side with the ship's roll. This dynamic movement of heavy liquid violently erodes a ship's balance, dramatically accelerating the loss of stability. And the data here beautifully, or tragically, illustrates the fatal technical gap that trapped that water on board. While the firefighting system pumped water in incredibly fast, the scuppers, which were partially blocked by debris, were completely inadequate. Due to the port beam seas and the severe heel of the vessel, only about 6 scuppers were actually operational. So the actual outflow was severely bottlenecked at 330 cubic meters per hour, which was far below the required capacity. The firefighting water literally had nowhere to go, dropping tons of dead weight directly on the car deck. This is a direct quote sourced from the investigation, and it captures a chilling realization near the very end of the vessel's life. The master realized that the quantity of water was more dangerous than the fire. This marks the absolute, devastating pivot of the entire emergency. The operational focus shifted entirely from fighting the flames to a desperate and ultimately uncoordinated battle just to maintain the ship's fundamental stability. Let's look at the final domino to fall. Operating without a clear understanding of exactly how that free surface water was destroying the ship's balance, the master made a fateful decision. Seeing a 15-degree list to starboard, he ordered port-side counterbalancing. He honestly thought adding water weight to the opposite side would correct the lean. But instead, this counterbalancing was the ultimate fatal human error. It further destabilized an already critically compromised vessel, aggressively accelerating the entire capsizing process. Let's transition to Section 4, crew response and evacuation, a breakdown of command. When you contrast standard emergency procedures with what actually happened during the event, it is honestly staggering. It reveals a total, systematic absence of emergency leadership. Standard procedures demand an immediate general alarm, contacting coastal authorities right away, and organized mustering. But the terrifying reality captured by the VDR revealed that no general alarm was ever sounded. The master actively refused to notify authorities or even nearby vessels. Passengers and crew were just left completely in the dark, waiting without any orders, which prevented any organized evacuation when time still permitted. 4.5 hours. For 4.5 continuous hours, the crew fought the fire using water. And during this entire window, the master actually refused suggestions from his own officers to notify nearby vessels or their managing company. Because he completely failed to communicate the distress, search and rescue operations were drastically, fatally delayed. Those 4.5 hours were a massive window of survivability that was completely squandered by indecision and a catastrophic failure of command. Section 5. Gaps in regulatory oversight. The triad of failure. But we have to look beyond the vessel itself, right? Because a disastrous breakdown in independent oversight happened across the board. The flag state entirely failed to verify the qualifications of its own inspectors. The coastal state, through port state control, somehow missed glaring material deficiencies during routine port visits. And the classification society actually issued safety certificates despite the fact that drainage pumps were non-functional, fire extinguishers were broken, and life-saving appliances were utterly unfit for use. These regulatory bodies failed to enforce the ISM code, turning a blind eye to the exact mechanisms designed to prevent this scale of tragedy. Finally, Section 6. Enhancing future vessel safety. Actionable directives. So, what do we do about it? The investigations directives mandate a massive paradigm shift for the maritime industry. First off, we absolutely must establish uniform damage and intact stability criteria globally for all ro-ro vessels. Second, we have to implement rigorous no-notice port state control inspections. We have got to move from passive paperwork compliance to aggressive physical verification. Third, we need to enforce strict anti-corruption measures to insulate our inspectors from commercial pressures. And finally, we must fundamentally redesign scupper regulations so that drainage systems are modeled for actual emergency trim and heel scenarios, not just perfectly flat laboratory conditions. I want to leave you with one absolutely critical question to take back to your boardrooms today. Are your current oversight mechanisms truly verifying the physical, material condition of your fleet, or are your teams simply checking off the paperwork? Protecting human life at sea requires absolute, uncompromising vigilance, because, as we've seen, a stamped certificate will not keep a compromised vessel afloat. Thank you all for your time, and let's make sure these hard lessons drive real, systemic change in our operations.